The last thing Rocco Gallo saw as a free man was the cool, unblinking gaze of the waitress he'd tried to break. He stood under the harsh fluorescent lights of a concrete interrogation room, his $1,000 suit rumpled and stained, his face a mask of disbelief. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and defeat. A shadow fell across the steel table, and a voice, as smooth and cold as polished marble, cut through the silence. "You took something from me, Rocco," the voice said. "A memory, a legacy. Now I'm taking everything from you." He looked up, his eyes struggling to focus, and saw her. Not in the cheap, worn-out uniform of the Gilded Spoon, but in a tailored suit that cost more than his car. There was no fear in her eyes. There never had been, he realized with a sickening lurch. Only waiting. It had all started 3 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday. The moment Rocco the Bull Gallo and his 2 mountains of muscle pushed through the door of the Gilded Spoon, the warm, comforting aroma of garlic and oregano seemed to curdle in the air. Laughter died in throats, forks clattered against plates, and a heavy silence descended. Rocco moved like a shark, all predatory grace and coiled violence, his eyes scanning the old-world decor with open contempt. "I need a table," he growled, not to the room at large. Ava, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail, approached him with a practiced, neutral smile. "Of course, sir. Right this way." He ignored her, his gaze locking onto Leo, the restaurant's manager, who was hurrying over from the bar. Leo was a man made of old loyalty and quiet dignity, his face a roadmap of 70 years of hard work. "Mr. Gallo," Leo said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "An unexpected pleasure." "Cut the crap, old man," Rocco sneered, waving a dismissive hand. "Give me your best table, and a bottle of your most expensive red, the real stuff, not the vinegar you serve the tourists." Ava watched from the sidelines as Leo seated them at the coveted corner booth. She brought the wine, a dusty bottle from the deep cellar, and performed the ritual of opening and pouring with quiet efficiency. Rocco took a sip, swirled it in his mouth, and then spat it onto the pristine white tablecloth. "Garbage," he declared, the word echoing in the silent restaurant. "You people are all about tradition, but you've forgotten quality." He looked at Leo, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. "It's pathetic." His eyes then landed on a collection of framed photos on the wall, chronicling the restaurant's history. He rose, his massive frame eclipsing the small pictures, and unhooked one. It was a faded black and white image of a much younger Leo, his arm slung around a proud, smiling man. "Who's this?" Rocco demanded, tapping the glass. "That's Arthur Sterling," Leo said, his voice tight. "The founder. He was a great man." "Was?" Rocco repeated, savoring the past tense. He carried the photo back to the table and slammed it down, face up. Then, with deliberate slowness, he picked up his water glass, slick with condensation, and placed it directly on top of Arthur Sterling's face. "A great coaster." Leo's face went pale. A collective gasp rippled through the few remaining patrons. Ava felt a cold, sharp anger pierce through her carefully constructed waitress persona. That was her father's face, staring up through a growing ring of water damage. Rocco caught her eye and grinned, a flash of white teeth in a predator's face. He thought he was intimidating a nobody. After they finished their meal, leaving most of it untouched, Rocco tossed a wad of cash onto the table. Then he peeled off a single crumpled dollar bill, threw it onto the polished floor at Ava's feet, and gestured with his chin. "For the floor mat," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Pick it up." Ava didn't move. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. The air crackled with tension. One of his goons took a step forward, but Rocco waved him off, laughing. "No fight in her," he scoffed. just like this whole pathetic place. He turned and swept out of the restaurant, his laughter bouncing off the walls, leaving a trail of humiliation and fear in his wake. Leo rushed to the table and picked up the photograph, his hands trembling as he wiped at the moisture. But the damage was done. A faint, white ring now marred the image of his friend, a permanent scar. "I'm so sorry, Ava," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. Ava picked the dollar bill off the floor, her movements calm and precise. She smoothed it out, folded it neatly, and tucked it into her apron. "Don't be, Leo," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "He just made a deposit. The withdrawal is going to be hell." Later that night, the scent of garlic and wine was replaced by the cool, sterile hum of servers. In a hidden sub-level beneath the restaurant's wine cellar, the Gilded Spoon's true nature was revealed. It wasn't a restaurant, it was a fortress, and the waitress was its queen. Ava sat before a bank of monitors, the cheap uniform replaced by a simple black turtleneck and trousers. The room was a state-of-the-art command center, a web of silent, blinking lights and streams of data. On the main screen, security footage of Rocco's visit played on a loop. "Isabella, are you seeing this?" Ava spoke into a headset, her voice crisp and authoritative. "I see a pig trying to mark his territory," a voice replied from a secure speaker. "Standard underworld thuggery. Why are you so interested in this one?" "It's not what he did," Ava said, zooming in on Rocco's face as he spat the wine. She ran a micro-expression analysis program. Red flags for contempt and disgust lit up, but also something else, a flicker of deep-seated anxiety. "It's why he did it. This isn't a power play, it's a performance." She rewound the footage, isolating the moment he tapped his fingers on the table while insulting Leo. "Count the rhythm," she instructed. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's a nervous tick. He's under pressure. Significant financial pressure. She switched feeds to a camera focused on one of Rocco's bodyguards. She magnified the image of his phone as he sent a quick text. "He's using a custom-skinned version of Signal. They think it's untraceable. Get the digital team on it. I want to know who he was talking to and what he said. This whole display tonight, it was a desperate man trying to project strength." "Already on it," Isabella replied. "You're getting good at this, boss. Seeing the cracks in the armor." "My father taught me to watch, not just to see," Ava said, her eyes hardening as she paused the footage on the desecrated photograph. Rocco Gallo didn't just insult a manager tonight. He declared war on the Sterling legacy. He just doesn't know it yet. The war escalated 2 days later. Rocco, impatient and arrogant, summoned Leo to a back-alley meeting. Ava watched from a rooftop across the street, a high-powered microphone aimed at the scene below, feeding the audio directly to her earpiece. "I'm buying the restaurant, old man." Rocco's voice crackled through the feed. "My offer is 50,000. Cash, you take it, or I take it." "It's not for sale," Leo said, his voice unwavering. "It's a landmark. It belongs to the Sterling family." "The Sterlings are gone!" Rocco roared, slamming a fist against the brick wall. "Arthur is in the ground. His little girl, who knows where? This place is a relic, and I'm the future. You have 24 hours to sign the deed, or your precious landmark becomes a parking lot, with you under it." Leo stood his ground. "The answer is no." Rocco laughed, a low, menacing sound. "Wrong answer." Ava knew what was coming next. It was a classic intimidation tactic. Squeeze the subordinate to break the leader. Except they had the chain of command completely backward. That night, as she walked the 3 blocks to her modest apartment, part of her deep cover identity, 2 shadows detached themselves from a darkened doorway. They were Rocco's men, the same ones from the restaurant. "Leaving so soon?" the first one sneered, blocking her path. "The bull was very disappointed in your boss's decision," the second one added, circling behind her. "He thinks maybe a message is in order, a message to the old man that his employees aren't safe." Ava stood perfectly still, her heart rate steady, her mind a cold, calculating machine. She assessed their positions, their footing, the distance to the nearest streetlight. "I'm just a waitress," she said, her voice intentionally trembling. "I don't know anything about any decisions." "You know Leo," the first goon said, stepping closer. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "And you're going to tell him to convince him to sign. Understand?" He shoved her against the wall. The impact jarred her, but she absorbed it, her body tensing. As he leaned in, his foul breath washing over her, his eyes fell on the small, silver locket around her neck. It was a simple oval, a gift from her father on her 16th birthday. He ripped it from her neck, the delicate chain snapping. "What's this piece of junk?" He held it up, inspecting it with a sneer, before closing his massive fist around it. There was a faint crunch of soft metal. He opened his hand and let the crushed, broken pieces of the locket fall to the grimy pavement. "Trash," he grunted. "Just like everything else in that dump." That was it. The final line. The desecrated photo was an attack on her father's legacy. This was an attack on her father's love. The cold anger inside Ava ignited into a silent, white-hot inferno. They thought they were delivering a message. They had no idea they had just signed their boss's death warrant. She looked down at the ruined locket, then back up at them. The fear in her eyes was gone, replaced by something so cold and empty, it made the goon instinctively take a step back. "Message received," she whispered. Back in her command center, the fury had been channeled into icy resolve. "Isabella," Ava said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Change of plans. We are no longer observing. We are dismantling. I want Rocco Gallo financially ruined, publicly humiliated, and legally caged. I want him to lose everything he has, and I want him to know it was me who took it." "What's the first move?" Isabella asked, sensing the shift. "His cash flow," Ava answered immediately. "The digital team cracked that encrypted message. Rocco is hosting a high-stakes poker game tomorrow night at the old shipyard warehouse. It's how he's trying to solve the liquidity problem I spotted. All the city's major underworld players will be there, millions in cash on the table." "A raid?" "Too simple," Ava countered. "A police raid gets the money confiscated as evidence. I want him to lose the money and his reputation. We're going to orchestrate a symphony of chaos." The plan was audacious, requiring split-second timing. Ava's team worked through the night. They prepared 2 anonymous tips. The first, sent to Dmitry Volkov, the notoriously violent head of the Russian mob and Rocco's biggest rival, detailed the game's location and the laughably light security. The tip was designed to appeal to Volkov's greed and his hatred for Rocco. The second tip was sent to Detective Miller of the GCPD's Financial Crimes Unit, a bulldog of a cop who had been trying to build a case against Rocco for years, but could never make anything stick. His tip was for the same location, but timed for 30 minutes after Volkov's was sent. The next night, Ava watched it all unfold on a dozen monitors, the feeds patched in from hacked traffic cameras and a micro-drone she had piloted into the warehouse rafters. She saw the city's criminal elite gathered around a massive table, piles of cash stacked high. Rocco was at the head, expansive and confident, believing his fortunes were about to turn. At precisely 11:15 p.m., as predicted, Volkov's heavily armed crew stormed the warehouse. The game erupted into chaos. Guns were drawn, but Volkov's men were faster and more brutal. They weren't there for a firefight. They were there for the cash. They swept the tables clean, stuffing duffel bags with millions of dollars, and were gone in less than 5 minutes, leaving Rocco's guests battered, furious, and penniless. Rocco stood amidst the wreckage, his face a thunderous mask of rage and humiliation. He had just been robbed blind in his own house in front of his most important peers. His reputation was in tatters. And then, at 11:46 p.m., the warehouse doors burst open again. This time, it was Detective Miller and a dozen armed officers. "GCPD, nobody move!" They found a crime scene, but no cash. They found a room full of known criminals, but no evidence of gambling. Rocco could only stand there, sputtering in impotent fury as Miller's men searched the place, a smug look on the detective's face. "Lost something, Rocco?" Miller asked, kicking an overturned chair. Rocco was brought in for questioning, but released hours later without charge. The damage, however, was catastrophic. In a single night, he had lost millions in cash and, more importantly, the respect of the underworld. He was no longer the bull. He was a joke. In her command center, Ava watched the news reports. A small, grim smile touched her lips. It was a good start, a satisfying taste of karma. But it was only the beginning. The public humiliation was a jab. She was still setting up the knockout punch. Rocco Gallo was a cornered animal. The disastrous poker game had left him paranoid and desperate. He tore through his own organization, looking for the rat he was sure had betrayed him. His violent temper, once a tool of intimidation, became a liability. He alienated allies and made his own men fearful. He was bleeding support, and Ava was there to bleed him dry. The poker game was phase 1, Ava told Isabella over their secure line. It destabilized him. Now we go for the kill shot. I need the source of his entire operation, the master ledger. Our intel suggests he keeps a hard copy and a digital backup in the safe in his office at Gallo Construction, Isabella reported. The place is a fortress. Biometric locks, pressure plates, 24-hour armed guards. A frontal assault is impossible. We won't use a frontal assault, Ava said, pulling up a personnel file on her screen. We'll use a ghost. The file belonged to Sal Marcone, one of Rocco's most trusted, long-serving lieutenants. But the file went deeper. It included a heavily encrypted police report about Sal's younger brother, Danny, a low-level enforcer who had vanished 2 years ago. The unofficial story was that Danny had skimmed from Rocco, and Rocco had made him disappear. Sal had been forced to swallow his grief and continue serving the man who murdered his brother. Ava decided to give Sal his revenge. The meet was arranged in a quiet, forgotten corner of a public library. Sal arrived looking haggard, his eyes darting nervously. Ava sat at a table, dressed plainly, looking like a student studying for exams. "Who are you?" Sal whispered, sliding into the chair opposite her. "A friend of your brother's," Ava said softly. Sal flinched as if struck. "Danny's dead." "I know, and I know Rocco did it," Ava continued, sliding a thin tablet across the table. "And I have the proof." On the screen was a satellite image of a remote patch of swampland upstate, time-stamped from the night Danny disappeared. A second image showed thermal readings indicating a recent burial. The final file was a redacted witness statement from another of Rocco's men, now in federal protection, detailing how Rocco had personally executed Danny Marcone. Sal stared at the screen, his face crumbling. The grief and rage he had suppressed for 2 years boiled to the surface. "What do you want?" he choked out. "I want Rocco's ledger," Ava said. "You have access to his office. I need you to plant a device, a data cloner, no bigger than a coin. You stick it to the back of his server tower. It will do the rest." "He'll kill me." "He'll never know," Ava promised. She pushed another folder across the table. "This contains a passport, a plane ticket to Buenos Aires, and the deeds to a small vineyard, all in your name. There's an account with enough money for you and your family to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. You plant the device, you walk out, and you never look back." The desperation in Sal's eyes warred with a burning desire for vengeance. Vengeance won. The following day was a symphony of tension. Ava and her team monitored everything from a mobile command van parked a block from Gallo Construction. They had hacked the building's security cameras and had a direct feed from a micro camera disguised as a button on Sal's shirt. "He's on the move," Isabella narrated, her voice tight. "Rocco is heading to a meeting across town. The window is open." They watched Sal walk down the hallway to Rocco's office. He swiped his keycard, entered his code, and the heavy oak door clicked open. "He's in," Ava breathed. The office was an opulent monstrosity of dark wood and black leather. Sal moved quickly to the large, ornate desk. He knelt, his hands trembling as he fumbled in his pocket for the data cloner. "Heart rate is 140, Isabella said. "He needs to calm down." Suddenly, a voice crackled from the speaker on Ava's console. It was Rocco. "Sal, you there?" Sal froze, his hand hovering over the server. "Rocco's on the car's Bluetooth," Isabella hissed. "He must have forgotten something." "Yeah, boss, I'm here," Sal managed to say, his voice strained. "Just grabbing those zoning permits you wanted." "Forget the permits," Rocco's voice barked. "I left my lucky cigar cutter on the desk. It was a gift from my father. Bring it down to the car. Now." Panic flashed in Sal's eyes. The cutter was on the desk, in plain sight, just inches from where he needed to plant the device. He had seconds. With one hand, he grabbed the silver cutter. With the other, his back to the door, he slapped the magnetic cloner onto the back of the server tower. A tiny green light blinked once, then vanished. It was done. "On my way, boss," Sal said, his voice miraculously steady. He walked out of the office, closing the door behind him. In the command van, Ava and her team let out a collective sigh of relief. "The clone is active," Isabella confirmed, as streams of data began pouring onto their screens. "We have the ledger." The digital ledger was a masterpiece of criminal accounting, but it was locked behind a brutal layer of encryption. Ava's team of coders, the best in the world, slammed against it for 48 hours straight. "It's not a standard algorithm," the lead coder reported, his face pale with exhaustion. "It's personal, a sequence of numbers that mean something only to him." Ava leaned back, closing her eyes, putting herself in Rocco's mind. Arrogant, sentimental about his own power, his father's cigar cutter. His father. "His father," she said aloud. "When did Rocco take over the family business?" Isabella's fingers flew across a keyboard. 22 years ago. His father, Marco Gallo, had a heart attack on June 12th. Rocco was officially named the new boss on June 13th. "That's it," Ava said. "The date he became king. Try it. Month, day, year. 060013. The coder typed in the sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft chime, the encryption shattered. On the screen, the ledger opened, revealing decades of organized crime in stark, undeniable detail. Bribes to city officials, judges on the payroll, money laundering schemes, and a list of unsolved disappearances with names and dates. It was a kill shot. It was a dynasty killer. "He's trying to claw back his reputation," Isabella said, pointing to a news feed. "Rocco Gallo is hosting the annual Police Benevolent Association charity gala. He's the guest of honor, slated to make a record-breaking donation." Ava looked at the invitation on the screen. The event was in 2 days, at the city's most prestigious hotel ballroom. The mayor, the police chief, every powerful figure in the city would be there. Rocco was trying to buy back his legitimacy with the very money he had stolen. "He's building his own stage," Ava said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. How thoughtful of him. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. The night of the gala, the grand imperial ballroom, was a sea of black ties and shimmering gowns. The air hummed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the low murmur of polite, powerful conversation. At the center of it all was Rocco Gallo, preening in the spotlight. Tonight was his coronation. He stood on the grand stage, flanked by the mayor and the police chief, a broad, magnanimous smile plastered on his face. The poker game fiasco was a distant memory, a minor stumble on his ascent to true, untouchable power. He was no longer just a feared man. He was becoming a respected one. "Rocco, this donation is unprecedented," Mayor Thompson said, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and greed. "The new youth center this will fund. We'll have to name a wing after you." "Think nothing of it, Mr. Mayor," Rocco said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. He clapped the chief on the back, a gesture of ownership. "This city has been good to the Gallo family. It's only right we give back. We're all on the same team, after all." He stepped to the lectern, tapping the microphone. The room quieted, all eyes on him. "Friends, colleagues." His voice boomed with self-satisfaction. "This city is about the future. It's about tearing down the old, dusty relics and building something strong, something new." His eyes scanned the crowd, a king surveying his court. "Some people cling to the past, to faded photographs and crumbling traditions. I say, let the past serve the future. Just yesterday, my company acquired a piece of this city's history, a small, insignificant restaurant, but a symbol nonetheless. A symbol that the old ways must make way for progress." The crowd, filled with people who owed him, applauded enthusiastically. He had won, utterly and completely. He had even crushed that final, irritating symbol of the old world. The gilded spoon was his. The old man, Leo, had finally caved, signing the deed over for a pittance, looking utterly broken. Rocco hadn't bothered with the details. His lawyers handled the wire transfer. He was too busy planning his victory lap. He took a sip of champagne, the bubbles a perfect metaphor for his effervescent mood. Then the grand ballroom doors swung open and a hush fell over the room, starting near the entrance and spreading like a ripple in a pond. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. A woman walked in, and the collective intake of breath was almost audible. She wore a simple, elegant black gown that flowed like liquid night. Her hair, once tied back in a simple ponytail, was styled in soft waves that framed a face of stunning, severe beauty. Diamonds glittered at her throat, cold and brilliant as starlight. She moved with an impossible grace and an aura of absolute authority that commanded silence. Rocco squinted, a flicker of confusion clouding his perfect evening. He knew that face, but he couldn't place it. The high cheekbones, the determined set of her jaw. The waitress? His mind recoiled at the absurdity. What in God's name is she doing here, dressed like that? It's impossible. His brain couldn't reconcile the image of the floor mat with the regal woman striding toward him. She walked directly toward the stage, her gaze fixed on him, unwavering and intense. The crowd parted for her as if she were royalty. "Who the hell is that?" the mayor muttered. Rocco's smile tightened. "Security," he hissed to one of his men. "We have a party crasher. Get her out of here. Gently." The bodyguard moved to intercept her, but she gave him a look so chillingly authoritative that he physically recoiled, stopping dead in his tracks. She ascended the small steps to the stage and took the microphone from the stunned master of ceremonies. "Good evening," she said. Her amplified voice was not loud, but it filled every corner of the vast ballroom, clear and steady as a surgeon's scalpel. Is that any way to treat your business partner, Rocco? Rocco laughed, a harsh, uncertain sound. Business partner? You're delusional. You served me coffee 3 weeks ago. And you served me a masterclass in desperation, she replied, her eyes boring into his. The way you spat that perfectly good wine. A performance. The way you tapped your fingers on the table when you thought no one was watching. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's the rhythm of a man terrified of losing everything. Rocco's hand, which had been resting on the lectern, jerked back as if burned. The blood began to drain from his face. How could she know that? A cold dread began to seep into the warm champagne glow in his gut. For those of you who don't know me, she announced to the silent, captivated room, my name is Ava Sterling. A ripple of recognition went through the older members of the crowd. Sterling. The name still carried weight. Rocco's face went rigid. The waitress. It was the waitress. But how? And that dusty relic you were just talking about, Mr. Gallo? Ava continued, her voice laced with steel. The gilded spoon, the one you were so proud to acquire. You bought it yesterday, or so you think. I have the deed, Rocco snarled, his voice losing its smooth veneer. Signed by that pathetic old man. Yes, you do, Ava agreed with a chilling smile. Signed by Leo, my father's most loyal friend, and the bravest man I know. He played his part perfectly, didn't he? He looked so broken, so defeated. It must have been very satisfying for your ego. She gestured to the side of the room. By the bar, Leo stood, not in a server's uniform, but a simple, dignified suit. He met Rocco's horrified gaze and gave a slow, deliberate nod. Rocco was stunned, his mind reeling. He was with you? Always, Ava said. And the lawyers who handled the transfer, Sterling and Associates, my lawyers. The wire transfer you so generously approved? It didn't go to Leo. It went from your Cayman Islands laundering account directly into a federally monitored asset forfeiture fund. You paid the government to buy a building I already owned. She reached into a small, beaded clutch and pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill. She held it up between 2 fingers. Your donation tonight is appreciated, but you already made a much, much larger one. This was just the down payment. For the floor mat, remember? A collective gasp went through the audience. Rocco's face, which had been flushed with victory, was now the color of ash. He looked from the dollar bill to her face, and for the first time, he saw her. He saw the cold, calculating intelligence. He saw the waiting. You came into my home, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously low pitch. You desecrated my father's memory for sport. You put a water ring on his photograph. You thought you were attacking a restaurant. But the Gilded Spoon is not a building, Rocco. It's an institution, and we protect our own. You're insane, he sputtered, trying to laugh, but the sound was strangled and weak. She's crazy. Someone get her off the stage. But no one moved. They were all transfixed, watching the predator become the prey. She nodded to a figure in the tech booth. Behind her, the massive screens that were meant to display smiling children flickered to life. The image that appeared was grainy, from a hidden camera in Rocco's own office. There he was, pouring a drink, talking to his lawyer. The feds are sniffing around the poker game, but they've got nothing. Rocco's voice boomed through the ballroom sound system. As long as the ledger is safe, we're untouchable. The donation tonight will buy us all the goodwill we need. The mayor, the chief, they're puppies who'll eat from my hand for another year. Mayor Thompson and the police chief recoiled as if they'd been slapped, their faces masks of pure horror. The crowd erupted in shocked shouts and angry murmurs. The ledger? Ava said into the microphone, her voice dripping with contempt. The one protected by the date you became king? 06013, the day after your father's convenient heart attack. A little sentimental, don't you think? You mean this ledger? The video feed vanished, replaced by scrolling columns of names, dates, and figures. It was the decrypted ledger. Page after page of damning evidence filled the screens. Judge M. Abernathy, $50,000, dismissal of assault charges. Councilman B. Davies, $120,000, favorable zoning variance, Pier 4. GCPD evidence locker transfer, case Naju 704B, lost. It went on and on, a digital confession broadcast for the entire city elite to see, many of whom now saw their own names scrolling past in stark black and white. A new entry appeared at the bottom, highlighted in red. Disappearance of Daniel Marcone, executed by R.G., witness S. Marcone. Rocco Gallo stood frozen, his mouth agape, sweat beading on his grey skin. He was trapped in the spotlight of his own vanity, his empire collapsing around him in real time. He looked wildly around the room, but the faces that had shown him respect just moments before were now filled with fear and disgust. The side doors of the ballroom burst open with a deafening crash, and Detective Miller, his face grim with a vindication he had waited years for, led a phalanx of uniformed officers into the room. "Rocco Gallo," Miller's voice rang out, clear and final. "You're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, bribery, and multiple counts of homicide." Chaos erupted. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every detail of his humiliation. As two officers wrenched his arms behind his back, and the cold steel of handcuffs bit into his wrists, Rocco's wild eyes found Ava's. He let out a primal roar of pure, impotent fury. As the officers dragged him away, a fallen king being hauled from his own corrupted court, Ava stepped close, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "You put a water stain on a photograph, a temporary mark. I put your name on a prison manifest, a permanent record. Enjoy the future you were so excited to build." Weeks later, the gilded spoon was warm and bright, filled with the happy chatter of loyal customers. The ugly water ring on the photo of Arthur Sterling and Leo had been professionally restored, and it now hung in a place of honor behind the bar. Behind the bar, a small television played the evening news. In a verdict that has rocked the city, crime boss Rocco Gallo was found guilty on all counts today, a reporter announced. Sentenced to life without parole, this marks the end of the Gallo crime family's reign. The prosecution's key evidence, a digital ledger provided by an anonymous source, has also implicated over a dozen public officials, including Mayor Thompson and former Police Chief Henderson, who are facing federal charges. The footage cut to Rocco in a drab orange prison jumpsuit. He looked small, broken, and old. His eyes, once burning with arrogance, were now hollow and defeated. Ava sat at the corner booth, the same one Rocco had demanded. She wasn't wearing a uniform, but a simple cashmere sweater. Across from her sat Leo, his shoulders seeming lighter than they had in years. On a tablet in the center of the table, Sal Marcone and his family smiled, waving from a sun-drenched vineyard in Argentina. They were all watching the broadcast together. Ava felt no joy, no thrill of victory, only a quiet, profound sense of justice delivered, a debt settled. The scales, so long tipped in favor of evil, had been balanced. "He would be so proud of you, Ava," Leo said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "He always said this place wasn't about the food. It was about protecting people, creating a sanctuary. You've honored that more than he could have ever imagined." Ava looked at the photo of the smiling, proud man who had taught her to watch, not just to see. She looked at the loyal faces on the screen and the one sitting across from her. They were her family. This restaurant, this network, this fight for the forgotten. This was her legacy. She raised her glass, and they all followed suit. a silent toast to a new beginning. The war was over. The withdrawal was complete. The Queen was home.